He looked at her across the settlement table and laughed, throwing a $10 bill at her like she was a beggar. "Take it," he sneered. "It's more than you're worth." Derek Reynolds thought he had won. He thought stripping his wife of every penny would break her. He didn't know that the woman signing those divorce papers wasn't just a housewife. She was the keeper of a secret worth billions. And when she stepped out of that courtroom, she wasn't walking away into poverty. She was walking toward a man who could buy Derek's entire company before breakfast. This is the story of the regret that shattered a man's life. You won't believe who was waiting for her outside. The fluorescent lights of the conference room in downtown Seattle hummed with a low, irritating buzz, but it was nothing compared to the noise coming from Derek Reynolds' mouth. "I'm telling you, she gets nothing beyond the prenup minimum," Derek said, leaning back in the plush leather chair. He adjusted the cuffs of his bespoke Italian suit, ensuring his Rolex Daytona caught the light. "Emily has never worked a day in our 5-year marriage. She contributed nothing to the Reynolds tech empire." Nothing. Emily sat on the opposite side of the mahogany table. She wore a simple, slightly worn grey cardigan and jeans that had seen better days. Her hands were folded in her lap, her face pale and unreadable. Next to her, her court-appointed lawyer, a tired man named Mr. Henderson, shuffled through papers nervously. "Mr. Reynolds," Mr. Henderson began, his voice shaky. "My client supported you through law school and the early days of your startup. She managed the household, entertained your investors, and she made canapes, Henderson. Any catering service could do that," Derek cut in, his voice dripping with condescension. He looked at Emily, his eyes cold. "Let's be real, Emily. You were a trophy that lost its shine. You don't understand business. You don't understand the value of $1 because you've been spending mine for half a decade." The cruelty in the room was palpable. Derek's lawyer, a shark named Marcus Thorne, smirked. "The offer is final, Mrs. Reynolds. A one-time settlement of $10,000 and the 2018 Honda Civic. If you contest it, we will drag this out until you can't afford to buy bread." Emily finally looked up. Her eyes were not filled with the tears Derek expected. They were clear, dangerous even. But Derek was too arrogant to notice. "Is that really how you remember it, Derek?" Emily asked, her voice soft but steady. "You don't remember the nights I stayed up coding the back end of your first app because you were too drunk to type? You don't remember who introduced you to the angel investor from Zurich?" Derek laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "You? Coding? Please, you probably fixed a typo. And that investor, he liked you because you were pretty, Emily. Don't confuse your looks with talent. But now," he looked her up and down with disdain, "you're 30, you're tired, and honestly, you're embarrassing me." He pulled a crisp $10 bill from his wallet and flicked it across the table. It fluttered and landed near her hand. "Here, for the taxi home, since I'm keeping the Mercedes." The room went silent. Even Marcus, Derek's shark of a lawyer, looked uncomfortable. This was beyond legal strategy. This was malice. Emily didn't touch the money. She reached for the pen. "Just sign the papers, Emily," Derek hissed, "and disappear. Go back to whatever trailer park I pulled you out of." Emily picked up the pen. The scratching sound as she signed, Emily Andrea, her maiden name, echoed in the silence. She pushed the papers back. "I won't contest the divorce, Derek," she said, standing up. She didn't take the $10. "But remember this moment. You aren't losing a dependent. You're losing your safety net." "I don't need a net," Derek scoffed, checking his phone. "I have wings." "We'll see," Emily whispered. She turned and walked out of the conference room, the heavy oak doors closing with a finality that sent a strange shiver down Derek's spine. a shiver he immediately dismissed as a draft from the air conditioning. Outside the law firm, the Seattle sky had opened up. A torrential downpour battered the pavement, turning the gutters into rushing rivers. Emily stood under the awning of the building, hugging her thin cardigan around herself. Derek exited 5 minutes later, flanked by Marcus. He was laughing, high on the adrenaline of his victory. A sleek black limousine pulled up to the curb. The window rolled down, revealing a woman with platinum blonde hair and diamonds that sparkled even in the gloom. It was Monica, Derek's executive assistant, and the reason for the divorce. "Did you crush her, baby?" Monica chirped, blowing bubble gum. "Totally," Derek grinned, opening the door. He paused, seeing Emily standing a few feet away, shivering. "Oh," Derek mocked, feigning sympathy. "Bus running late? You know, if you beg, Monica might let you ride in the trunk." Monica giggled. "You, Derek? She's wet. She'll ruin the leather." "Right. Good luck, Emily. Try not to starve." Derek got into the limo, and it sped off, splashing dirty puddle water onto Emily's jeans. She didn't flinch. She just watched the taillights disappear into the grey mist. For a moment, she looked small, defeated, and alone. A woman discarded by the man she had built. But then, the sound of a different engine cut through the noise of the rain. It wasn't the roar of a sports car or the hum of a limo. It was the heavy, rhythmic thrum of a helicopter overhead, followed by the purr of a matte black Rolls-Royce Phantom approaching from the opposite direction. The car moved with a ghostly silence, pressing through the traffic like a predator. It pulled up exactly where Derek's limo had been, moments before. A driver in a pristine uniform stepped out, ignoring the rain, and opened the rear door with a white-gloved hand. "Mrs. Sterling," the driver said, bowing his head respectfully. "We have been waiting for your signal." Emily's posture changed instantly. The slump in her shoulders vanished. Her chin lifted. She reached into her worn tote bag and pulled out a pair of sunglasses, sliding them on despite the rain. "Thank you, Alfred," she said, her voice dropping the soft, submissive tone she had used in the meeting. "Take me to the airstrip. Julian is waiting." "Of course, madam." "And the asset?" "The asset is secured," Emily said, glancing back at the building where Derek was celebrating his win. Derek signed away all claims to intellectual property created prior to the marriage incorporation. He was so busy hiding his cash, he forgot about the patents. "A fatal error," Alfred noted, closing the door as Emily slid into the heated, starlight ceiling interior of the Rolls-Royce. As the car pulled away, Emily pulled out a sleek, transparent phone, a prototype not yet released to the public. She dialed a number. "It's done," she said into the phone. "He thinks I'm destitute. Initiate phase 2. A deep, warm voice answered on the other end. "Finally. I've been waiting for you to come home, Emily. The jet is fueled. Paris for dinner?" "Paris sounds perfect," Emily replied, a small smile playing on her lips. "But first, send the RSVP to the Reynolds Tech Winter Gala. I think it's time they met the real competition." 3 months had passed since the divorce was finalized. For Derek Reynolds, life had been a blur of parties, stock spikes, and indulgence. Without Emily holding him back with her caution and budget talks, he had expanded Reynolds Tech aggressively, leveraging massive loans to fund a new AI project called the Sentinel. He was currently the toast of Seattle. He sat in his corner office, looking out over the city. Monica was on the sofa, scrolling through Instagram. "Babe," she said, not looking up. "Everyone who is anyone is coming to the Winter Gala tonight, even the mayor." But what?" Derek asked, sipping a scotch. "There's a rumor that Vanguard Systems is sending a representative. You know, that shadowy European tech giant that just bought out Silicon Valley's biggest chip manufacturer? Derek frowned. Vanguard Systems was a ghost story in the tech world. Nobody knew who owned it. They just appeared, bought up superior technology, and vanished. They were worth trillions, while Reynolds Tech was worth billions. Why would Vanguard come to my gala? Derek mused. Unless they want to buy me out. That has to be it. They know the Sentinel is going to change the world. He stood up, adjusting his tie. This is it, Monica. Tonight, I become the king of this city. If Vanguard is there, I'll name my price. What about your ex? Monica laughed. Think she'll try to crash it to get some free shrimp? Derek chuckled. Emily? Last I heard, her mail was bouncing. She probably moved back to her parents' farm in Idaho. She's ancient history. The ballroom of the Grand Hyatt was dripping in gold and crystal. The elite of the business world were there. Derek moved through the crowd like a shark, shaking hands and accepting praise. He felt invincible. Derek, darling, Lady Worthington, a major investor, clinked glasses with him. Wonderful party. But tell me, is it true? Is the CEO of Vanguard Systems really here? I've heard the rumors. Derek smiled smoothly. I look forward to welcoming them to my city. Suddenly, the music stopped. The murmuring of the crowd died down. At the top of the grand staircase, the double doors swung open. Usually, guests were announced by the doorman. But this time, the doorman stayed silent, looking visibly shaken. A man stepped in first. He was tall, with broad shoulders and a jawline that could cut glass. He wore a tuxedo that cost more than most people's houses. It was Julian Sterling, a man known in the tabloids as the Billionaire hermit. He hadn't been seen in public for 5 years. A gasp rippled through the room. Julian Sterling was the heir to old banking money, but he had vanished to start his own ventures. But it wasn't Julian who stole the air from the room. It was the woman on his arm. She wore a dress of midnight blue velvet that hugged every curve, embroidered with actual diamonds that caught the light like stars. Her hair, once tied back in messy buns, flowed in luscious, glossy waves down her back. Around her neck sat the Star of the East, a sapphire necklace rumored to be lost since the 1920s. Derek squinted. The woman looked familiar. The way she walked, with a regal, effortless grace, was captivating. She looked like a queen surveying her subjects. She reached the bottom of the stairs, and Julian Sterling leaned in to whisper something in her ear. She laughed, a melodic, confident sound. Derek dropped his glass. It shattered on the marble floor, champagne splashing onto his shoes. Emily, he whispered. It couldn't be. Emily was plain. Emily was poor. Emily wore cardigans and clipped coupons. This woman was a goddess. Monica grabbed Derek's arm, her nails digging in. Who is that? And why is she wearing a necklace worth $10 million? Emily turned her head. Her eyes scanned the room, bypassing the mayor, bypassing the investors, until they locked onto Derek. She didn't smile. She didn't wave. She simply stared at him with a look of absolute, crushing indifference. Then she turned back to Julian, took a glass of champagne from a passing waiter, and walked deeper into the party. That's not possible, Derek stammered, his face turning red. She's a nobody. She's my ex-wife. A man standing next to Derek, a rival CEO named Mr. Cho, laughed quietly. You didn't know, Reynolds. That's not just your ex-wife. That's the founder of Vanguard Systems. Derek felt the blood drain from his face. What? Vanguard, Cho repeated. Emily Andrea. She writes the code. Sterling provides the capital. They've been partners for a decade. Rumor has it she was working on a project called The Sentinel about 6 years ago, long before you announced yours. Derek's knees went weak. If Emily had written the code for the Sentinel before they were married, and if he had just mocked her and cast her aside without securing the rights, he hadn't just lost a wife. He had just walked into a trap that was about to snap his neck. The whisper network of the gala was moving faster than fiber-optic cables. Within 10 minutes of Emily's entrance, the atmosphere in the ballroom had shifted from a celebration of Reynolds tech to a hushed, voyeuristic spectacle centered on the mysterious woman in the midnight blue dress. Derek Reynolds stood frozen near a towering ice sculpture of a swan, his face a mask of sweating panic. He watched as Emily moved through the room. She wasn't just attending the party. She was holding court. The mayor was laughing at her jokes. The CEO of Petro Global was leaning in close, listening intently to whatever she was saying. "Derek, stop staring," Monica hissed, tugging on his sleeve. She looked insecure for the first time in her life. Her diamonds suddenly looked small compared to the sapphire resting on Emily's collarbone. "She's just putting on a show. It's probably a rental dress. And that guy? Julian Sterling. He's probably just using her to get to you." "Get to me?" Derek snapped, his voice too loud. "Monica, look at them. Julian Sterling doesn't need to use anyone. He's worth 50 times what I am. And Emily—" He trailed off, watching Emily sip her champagne. She looked regal, untouchable. "I'm going over there," Derek announced, straightening his jacket. "Derek, don't—" Marcus Thorne, his lawyer, appeared at his elbow, looking pale. "I just did a background check on Vanguard Systems Incorporation documents. It's complicated. You shouldn't engage until we know more. I'm the CEO of this company, and this is my party," Derek snarled. "She's my ex-wife. I know her buttons. I can break her." He marched across the ballroom floor, Monica trailing behind him like a confused puppy. The crowd parted, sensing the impending collision. The music seemed to fade into the background as Derek approached the circle of elites surrounding Emily and Julian. "Well, well," Derek's voice boomed, cutting through the polite conversation. "The prodigal housewife returns." The circle fell silent. The mayor looked awkward and took a step back. Julian Sterling slowly turned his gaze toward Derek. His eyes were like ice, devoid of any warmth. But Emily didn't flinch. She turned slowly, a polite, distant smile on her face, the kind one gives to a rude stranger in a grocery store. "Hello, Derek," she said smoothly. "Lovely venue. Though the floral arrangements are a bit 2015, don't you think?" "Cut the act, Emily," Derek sneered, stepping into her personal space. Julian moved to intercept, but Emily held up a hand, stopping him. She could handle this. "What are you doing here? Who paid for the ticket, or did you sneak in through the kitchen?" Monica giggled nervously behind him. "Yeah, Emily. Did you win the lottery or something? Or is this all just—" She gestured vaguely at Emily's stunning appearance. "Costume jewelry." Emily looked at Monica, then back at Derek. Her expression softened into something resembling pity. "I'm here on business, Derek. As for the ticket—" She glanced at Julian. Julian spoke, his voice a deep baritone that commanded the room. "We didn't buy tickets, Reynolds. Vanguard Systems is the primary sponsor of the venue's restoration fund. Technically, we're your hosts." Derek's face flushed a deep crimson. "Bullsdut, you're trying to psych me out. Emily, tell him who you really are. Tell him you're a broke housewife who used to clip coupons for laundry detergent." "I did clip coupons," Emily admitted, her voice carrying clearly across the silent room. "I hate waste. Just like I hated wasting my potential on a man who thought my only value was in the kitchen. "You have no potential," Derek shouted, losing his composure entirely. "I built Reynolds Tech. I built the Sentinel. You were nothing but a leech." "The Sentinel," Emily repeated, tasting the words. She stepped closer to Derek, her heels clicking on the marble. "That's an interesting project, Derek. An AI predictive model for stock market fluctuations. Revolutionary." "That's right," Derek puffed out his chest. "Something your little brain couldn't comprehend." "Is that so?" Emily tilted her head. "Then why, on line 4000 of the source code, is there a comment that says, 'For my husband, who thinks I'm asleep while I build his future?'" The color drained from Derek's face so fast, he looked like a corpse. The glass in his hand shook. "How?" he whispered. "How do you know about the code comments? No one has seen the kernel source except me." "Because I wrote it, Derek," Emily said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper that only he and the surrounding circle could hear. "I wrote the kernel 3 years ago while you were out networking with Monica in Cabo. I wrote it to save your failing startup because I loved you. I left it on your server as a surprise, hoping you'd find it and be proud of me." She laughed dryly. "But you never looked at the code, did you? You just took the credit. You found the compiled program, assumed one of your engineers did it, and fired the team so you wouldn't have to pay bonuses. You claimed it as your genius." "Liar!" Monica screeched, sensing her meal ticket was in danger. "She's lying, Derek. Sue her." "It gets worse, Derek," Emily continued, ignoring Monica. "Since you initiated the divorce, I decided to check on my intellectual property. Imagine my surprise when I saw you were about to launch my beta test as a finished product." Derek backed away, his hands trembling. "You signed the settlement. You got $10,000. You have no rights to anything in Reynolds Tech. The prenup covers everything created during the marriage." Emily smiled, and it was the most terrifying thing Derek had ever seen. "Oh, Derek," she sighed, "you really should have read that prenup more carefully. Or at least, you should have let Marcus read it before you forced me to sign his draft." She turned to Julian. "Shall we go to the VIP lounge? I find the air down here a bit stagnant." "After you, my love," Julian said, offering his arm. They walked away, leaving Derek standing in the wreckage of his reputation. The investors were whispering frantically. The mayor was texting his office. Marcus Thorne was furiously typing on his tablet, sweat pouring down his forehead. "Derek," Marcus whispered, his voice trembling. "We have a problem." Derek didn't stay in the ballroom. He couldn't. He dragged Marcus and a sobbing Monica into the private elevator and jammed the button for the penthouse suite, which served as the VIP lounge. When the doors opened, the scene was calm, a stark contrast to the panic in Derek's mind. The lounge was dimly lit, smelling of rich leather and aged whiskey. Sitting by the fireplace, looking entirely at home, were Emily and Julian. Alfred, the driver, was standing by the door like a sentinel. "You can't just walk away from me," Derek shouted, storming into the room. "You can't make accusations like that in front of my investors." Emily set her teacup down on the saucer with a delicate clink. She didn't stand up. She gestured to the empty sofa opposite them. "Sit down, Derek. It's time for the exit interview." Derek remained standing, trying to loom over her. "I want the truth. Who are you, really?" Emily looked into the fire. "I am Emily Andrea. I was admitted to MIT at 15. I wrote my first encryption algorithm at 16. By the time I was 20, I had founded a small data security firm called Aegis." "I never heard of Aegis," Derek spat. "No, you wouldn't have. Because Julian bought it from me for $400 million when I was 21, Emily said calmly. Derek grabbed the back of the sofa to steady himself. 400,000,000. I was young, Emily continued, her voice distant. I had money, but I was lonely. I had spent my whole life behind a screen. I wanted to be normal. I wanted to see if someone could love me for me, not for the bank account or the brain. She looked at Derek, her eyes sad. Then I met you. You were charming. You were ambitious. You seemed so passionate. I decided to run an experiment. I put the money in a blind trust, managed by Julian, and I became Emily the housewife. I wanted to be your partner, Derek. I wanted to build a life with you. You lied to me, Derek screamed. You deceived me for 5 years. I omitted the truth, Emily corrected. But I never lied about who I was. I offered to help you with your business 1,000 times. You told me I was too pretty to worry about math. I offered to invest my inheritance, which you assumed was a few $1,000s from a grandma, and you laughed and told me to buy shoes. Julian leaned forward, his voice hard. She gave you every chance, Reynolds. I told her you were a narcissist. I told her you would bleed her dry emotionally. But she believed in you. She thought that if she helped you succeed from the shadows, you'd eventually see her value. And then came the Sentinel, Emily said. I spent 6 months of sleepless nights coding that engine because your company was 3 weeks away from bankruptcy. I saved you, Derek. And how did you repay me? You threw $10 at her, Julian growled, his hands clenching into fists. Derek looked at Marcus, desperate for a legal angle. The prenup. She signed the prenup. It said all assets acquired during the marriage are separate property, if kept in separate accounts. My company is mine. Her, whatever she has, is hers. Exactly, Marcus said, finally finding his voice. Mr. Reynolds is right. If you have millions, good for you. But Reynolds Tech and the Sentinel belong to Derek. Emily reached into her clutch and pulled out a folded document. It wasn't the divorce papers. It was a patent filing. Derek, you insisted on the prenup because you thought I was a gold digger. You wanted to ensure that anything I created or earned stayed mine, and anything you earned stayed yours. You were terrified I'd take half your startup. She slid the paper across the table. The prenup states that intellectual property created solely by one party remains the sole property of that party, regardless of its application in marital businesses, unless a formal transfer of rights is signed. Derek stared at the paper. The words blurred before his eyes. I wrote the Sentinel, Emily said softly. I have the timestamps. I have the original source code repository hosted on Vanguard's private servers. I never signed a transfer of rights to Reynolds Tech. You didn't ask me to, because you didn't think I was capable of creating it. You thought it just appeared. So, Derek choked out. So what does that mean? It means, Emily said, standing up and brushing invisible dust from her velvet dress, that Reynolds Tech is currently selling a product it doesn't own. It means you are committing copyright infringement on a massive scale against Vanguard systems. And, Julian added, standing up to join her, a shark-like grin appearing on his face, Vanguard Systems is known for being very aggressive with litigation, unless, of course, we come to an arrangement. Derek fell onto the sofa. Monica looked at him with disgust, seeing the power dissolve before her eyes. What do you want? Derek whispered. I have nothing if I lose the product. Oh, I don't want money, Derek, Emily said, walking toward the elevator. She paused at the door and looked back over her shoulder. I have plenty of that. I want your resignation, effective immediately. And if I refuse? Then I release the source code for free as open source software tomorrow morning, Emily said coldly, and Reynolds Tech's stock will hit 0 by lunch. She stepped into the elevator, Julian beside her. As the doors began to close, she delivered one final blow. Enjoy the gala, Derek. I hear the shrimp is excellent. You might want to pack some in a bag. It could be the last free meal you get for a while. The doors shut, leaving Derek in the silence of the penthouse, the sound of his own arrogance ringing in his ears. The morning sun hit the glass facade of the Reynolds Tech Tower, but inside the executive suite, the atmosphere was darker than a crypt. The usual hum of productivity had been replaced by a heavy, suffocating silence. Derek Reynolds hadn't slept. He was still wearing his tuxedo trousers and a wrinkled dress shirt, the collar undone and stained with sweat. He paced the length of his office like a caged predator, his expensive Italian loafers kicking at the plush carpet as if he could physically stomp away the impending disaster. On the mahogany desk, a half-empty bottle of expensive scotch sat next to a stack of legal documents that looked like a death warrant. "There has to be a loophole, Marcus," Derek shouted, his voice cracking. He grabbed a heavy crystal paperweight, an award for Innovator of the Year, and hurled it across the room. It smashed into the wall, leaving a jagged dent in the expensive wood paneling. "You are paid $500 an hour to find loopholes. That's your only job." Marcus Thorne, the man who had been Derek's legal shark for years, didn't even flinch. He sat at the conference table, surrounded by piles of digital tablets and printed briefs. He looked older, the fluorescent lights highlighting the deep bags under his eyes. "I've looked, Derek," Marcus said, his voice flat and exhausted. "I've spent the last 6 hours reviewing every comma, every clause, and every footnote in that prenup. I've cross-referenced it with Washington state patent law and the Vanguard systems filing. It's ironclad. In fact, it's a masterpiece of legal engineering. She didn't just protect herself. She built a digital gallows and waited for you to stick your own head in the noose. Don't give me poetry, Marcus. Give me a defense." "There is no defense for theft, Derek," Marcus snapped, finally losing his temper. "By explicitly listing solely created IP as separate property, a clause you insisted on to protect your early startup code, she legally retained ownership of the kernel. You own the brand Reynolds Tech. You own the office furniture and the marketing materials. But Emily owns the brain of the Sentinel. Without her license, your billion-dollar product is a hollow shell. If you launch it, Vanguard will sue us into the Stone Age before the first trade is even executed." The door to the office swung open without a knock. It wasn't a panicked secretary or a board member. It was Monica. She was dressed in a vibrant neon yoga outfit, carrying a kale smoothie and a shopping bag from a high-end boutique. She looked perfectly manicured, a sharp contrast to the wreckage in the room. She didn't look worried. She looked mildly inconvenienced. "Derek, honey, are we going to brunch or not?" she asked, not looking up from her phone. "The valet has been holding the car for 20 minutes, and honestly, the energy in the lobby is super weird today. People are crying in the break room. It's a total vibe kill." Derek stopped pacing. He looked at Monica, the woman he had showcased as his upgrade. He looked at the diamonds he had bought her with company credit, the same money he had claimed Emily wasn't entitled to. "Monica," Derek said, his voice trembling. "The company. I'm being forced out. Emily, she's taking everything. We might lose the penthouse. We might have to move." Monica paused, the straw of her smoothie halfway to her lips. She lowered the drink slowly, her eyes sharpening. The vacuous, playful expression she usually wore vanished, replaced by a calculating coldness that made even Marcus look away. "Lose the penthouse," she repeated. Derek, what are you talking about? You're the CEO. Just fire her or whatever. I can't fire her. She owns the technology. Derek screamed, his composure finally breaking. I have to resign, or they'll sue me for fraud. I'll be lucky if I don't end up in a federal prison. But it's okay. We can start over. I still have my talent. We can move to a smaller place, maybe a condo in the suburbs, until I get a new firm off the ground. Monica let out a short, sharp laugh. It was a sound devoid of any affection. She set her smoothie on his desk, right on top of an original blueprint, and began checking her nails. A condo in the suburbs, she scoffed. Derek, look at me. Do I look like a suburban housewife? Do I look like someone who clips coupons and waits for a bus? Monica, I love you, Derek pleaded, stepping toward her. I did all of this for us. No, you did it for your ego, Monica said, stepping back to avoid his touch. I'm a luxury, Derek, like a yacht or a private jet. You don't get to keep the yacht when you can't pay for the dockage. I'm not staying around to watch you sell your watches just to pay for a 2-bedroom apartment. I'm a high-maintenance woman, and you just became low interest. She picked up her bag and turned toward the door. You're leaving? Now? Derek gasped. My bags are already in the car, babe, she said over her shoulder. I saw the news alerts on Twitter. I'm going to stay with my sister in Malibu for a while. Don't call me unless your bank account has at least 7 zeros in it again, which, let's be real, probably won't happen. The door slammed shut. Derek stood in the center of the room, the silence heavier than before. He felt a sudden, sharp memory of Emily bringing him coffee at 3:00 a.m. while he struggled with his first business plan. He remembered her saying, "We'll get through this, Derek. We're a team." He had traded a teammate for a parasite, and the parasite had just finished the meal. "Mr. Reynolds?" Marcus's voice was soft now. "The board of directors is on the video line. They've finished their emergency session." Derek walked to the screen on his wall. The faces of the 6 board members appeared, men and women who had once laughed at his jokes and praised his genius. Now they looked at him with the clinical disgust one might reserve for a cockroach. "Derek," the chairman began, his voice echoing in the empty office. "We have reviewed the documentation provided by Vanguard Systems. It is the unanimous decision of this board that you have committed a massive breach of fiduciary duty. You represented an asset as company-owned when you knew, or should have known, it was the private property of your ex-wife." "I can fix it," Derek blurted out. "I'll negotiate with her." "It's already done," the chairman said coldly. "We have reached an agreement with Ms. Andrea. Vanguard Systems will acquire a majority stake in Reynolds Tech. The company will be rebranded as Andrea Sterling Global. As for you, you are terminated for cause, effective 5 minutes ago." "For cause?" Derek whispered. "But my severance, my stock options are null and void," the chairman finished. "We are also filing a civil suit to claw back the bonuses you paid yourself over the last 18 months, based on the fraudulent Sentinel projections. Security is at your door, Derek. You have 10 minutes to take what is yours, which according to our records isn't much." The screen went black. Derek looked at his desk. He realized with a jolt of pure, unadulterated terror that almost everything in this room, the furniture, the computer, even the pens, belonged to the corporation. The door opened. 2 security guards Derek had passed 1,000 times without a word stepped inside. One held a small cardboard box. "We need you to vacate the premises, sir," the guard said. Derek's hands shook as he grabbed a few personal items, his car keys, his wallet, a gold watch. As he reached for a framed photo of himself on the cover of a tech magazine, the guard shook his head. "Company property, sir. That was paid for by the PR department." Derek left the frame behind. He walked out of the office, his head down, through a gauntlet of employees. Some looked away in shame. Others watched with open satisfaction as the man who had mocked their hard work was led away like a criminal. He reached the elevator. As the doors closed, he caught his reflection in the polished brass. He didn't look like a titan of industry. He looked like a small, hollow man who had spent his life building a castle on a foundation of stolen sand. As the elevator descended toward the lobby, Derek reached into his pocket and felt a single, crumpled piece of paper. He pulled it out. It was a $10 bill he had found in the pocket of his tuxedo. The irony hit him like a physical blow. He had thrown $10 at the woman who owned his world. Now, as the doors opened to the street and the cold Seattle rain, it was the only thing he had left. The rain in Seattle was a relentless, rhythmic drumming that seemed to mock the pace of the city. It washed the expensive grime from the skyscrapers of the tech district and sent it rushing down into the industrial gutters of the outskirts, where the neon signs flickered with a tired, desperate energy. In a cramped, grease-smelling booth at Sal's Diner, Derek Reynolds sat alone, staring into a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. The man looking back at him from the darkened window was a stranger. His face was gaunt, the sharp, arrogant lines of his jaw softened by a lack of sleep, and the graying stubble of a man who could no longer afford high-end grooming. The bespoke Italian suits were gone, replaced by a scratchy, navy blue polyester uniform. On his chest, a plastic name tag read, Derek, Floor Associate. He worked at a liquidation outlet now, a cavernous warehouse filled with the discarded dreams of failed businesses and refurbished electronics. He spent his days explaining the warranty on off-brand air fryers to people who looked through him as if he were part of the furniture. It was a humiliating, slow-motion purgatory. "Hey, blue shirt!" a voice barked, breaking his trance. Derek looked up. A middle-aged man in a rain-slicked jacket was waving a receipt. "This toaster I bought yesterday. It smells like burning plastic. I want a refund." I'm on my break, sir," Derek mumbled, his voice a ghost of the booming baritone that once commanded boardrooms. "I don't care if you're on your deathbed," the man snapped. "Fix it, or get me someone who actually knows how to do their job." Derek stood up, his joints aching from 8 hours on the concrete warehouse floor. As he walked toward the counter, his eyes drifted to the television mounted above the diner's grill. Usually, it played local weather or looped sports highlights, but today, every channel was tuned to the same event, the Global Tech Summit in Geneva. The headline scrolling across the bottom of the screen made his heart stop. Vanguard Systems announces the Emily architecture, a total reset for global data privacy. The camera panned across a sea of world leaders, billionaires and journalists, all standing in a thunderous ovation. And then the camera zoomed in on the woman center stage. Emily Andrea, she had officially dropped the Reynolds name months ago, stood at the podium. She looked like a creature made of light and steel. She wore a sharp, minimalist white suit that radiated power. Her hair was styled in a sophisticated bob, and the exhaustion that had defined her eyes during their marriage was gone, replaced by a terrifying, brilliant clarity. She wasn't just a CEO. She was a visionary. For too long, Emily's voice filled the diner, broadcast through the tinny speakers. Technology has been used as a tool for extraction. We built platforms to take data, to take time, to take dignity. Today, Vanguard Systems is giving it back. The diner went silent. Even the man complaining about his toaster turned to watch. "The Emily architecture is open source for all non-profit organizations," she continued. "We are choosing to value human progress over quarterly dividends, because a legacy isn't built on what you take from the world. It's built on the foundations you lay for those who come after you. The camera cut to the front row of the auditorium. Julian Sterling was there, leaning forward with an expression of such pure, unadulterated pride that it felt like a knife in Derek's gut. Beside Julian sat a younger woman, a brilliant coder Emily had mentored, and a toddler they had recently adopted, a symbol of the family life Emily had once begged Derek to start with her. "She's something else, isn't she?" The waitress, a woman named Shirley who had seen 1,000 broken men pass through her booths, said as she wiped the counter. "I heard she's worth $100 billion, and she's giving half of it away to schools for girls. Can you imagine having that kind of heart?" Derek couldn't speak. He felt a physical pressure in his chest, a crushing weight of what if? He remembered the nights he had come home and found Emily hunched over her laptop, her eyes red from coding. He remembered how he had told her to shut that thing off and make herself useful by mixing him a drink. He had been holding a goddess in his arms and had treated her like a servant. "Sir? My toaster?" the customer prompted, though his voice had lost its edge. He, too, seemed mesmerized by the image of the woman on the screen. I'll handle it," Derek whispered. He walked behind the counter, his hands shaking. As he processed the $10 refund for the plastic toaster, the irony nearly choked him. $10. The exact amount he had flicked at her in that conference room. The tip he had given her for 5 years of her life. Now $10 was the difference between him eating dinner or going to bed hungry. After his shift ended, Derek walked out into the cold, biting wind. He couldn't afford a car. The Mercedes had been seized by the liquidators, and the Lexus had been repossessed when the bank accounts were frozen. He stood at the bus stop, his thin uniform jacket offering no protection against the Seattle dampness. Across the street, a massive digital billboard loomed over the intersection. It was a Vanguard Systems advertisement. It didn't show a product. It showed a simple, high-resolution image of a sunrise over a digital grid. The text read, "The future belongs to those who build with integrity. Vanguard Systems, founded by Emily Andrea." A group of college-aged kids stood near him, looking at their phones and laughing. One of them pointed at the billboard. "My brother works for her," the girl said, her eyes bright with excitement. "He says the culture there is insane. They actually care about the employees. And Emily? She still writes her own patches. She's like a legend." One of the boys looked at Derek, squinting in the dim light of the bus stop. "Hey, wait a minute. Are you that guy? The one from the regret meme?" Derek turned his face away, pulling his hood up. But it was too late. "Oh my God, it is him!" The boy laughed, elbowing his friend. "It's the $10 divorce guy. Look at him. From the penthouse to the bus stop. Man, talk about the ultimate fumble. You literally had the goat as a wife, and you traded her for a girl who blocked you on Instagram the day you lost your job." "Leave me alone," Derek croaked. "Hey, don't be like that," the kid teased, holding up his phone to take a video. "Give us a tip, CEO. How do you lose $1 billion woman in 10 minutes? Is there a master class for that?" The bus pulled up, hissing as the brakes engaged. Derek practically fell through the doors, ignoring the laughter behind him. He huddled into a seat at the very back, pressing his forehead against the vibrating glass of the window. As the bus crawled through the city, he passed the headquarters of his former company. The Reynolds Tech sign had been torn down. In its place stood a sleek, brushed steel logo, VS Global. The lobby, which he had once designed to be a shrine to his own ego, was now filled with light and plants. He saw young engineers gathered in the common areas, laughing and collaborating. It was a place of life, a place he was no longer allowed to enter. He reached his apartment, a tiny, one-room studio above a dry cleaner. The air was thick with the scent of chemical solvent and old carpet. He sat on the edge of his twin-sized bed and pulled his mail from his bag. It was a final notice from the IRS and a letter from a legal firm representing the board of directors. They were still coming for him. The clawback lawsuits were designed to ensure that Derek Reynolds would never have a surplus cent for the rest of his life. He would be paying back the fraudulent bonuses until he was 80. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his last remaining possession from his old life. The gold watch Monica had failed to steal. He had been holding on to it as a safety net, a last resort. He looked at the inscription on the back. It wasn't from Monica. It was a gift from Emily on their 3rd anniversary. It read, "To the man who sees the future, I'm glad I'm in it with you." Derek let out a broken, jagged sob. He clutched the watch to his chest, the cold metal biting into his skin. He had been a man who thought he saw the future, but he had been blind to the present. He had looked at the most valuable person in his life and saw only a shadow. He walked to the small, cracked window of his studio. From here, he couldn't see the mountains or the bay. He could only see the brick wall of the neighboring building and a small sliver of the street below. He thought about Emily in Geneva. He thought about her stepping into a private jet, surrounded by people who respected her, loved by a man who actually deserved her. He realized that for her, he wasn't even a villain anymore. He was just a footnote, a mistake she had corrected, a bug in the code that had been purged. The realization was more painful than the poverty. To be hated was one thing, but to be completely irrelevant to the person you once owned, that was the true ghost of his existence. He set the watch on the small wooden table. Tomorrow, he would sell it to the pawn shop on 4th Street. It would pay for 2 weeks of rent and a few bags of groceries. It was the last piece of Emily he had, and he was forced to trade it just to survive another day in the world she now ruled. Derek Reynolds laid down on the thin mattress, the sound of the rain outside turning into a dull grey roar. He closed his eyes, and in the darkness of the room, he could still see the glowing words from the billboard. "True value is hidden. Look closer." He had looked too late, and as the city hummed around him, a city that had already forgotten his name, Derek finally understood the cost of his arrogance. It wasn't measured in billions of dollars. It was measured in the silence of an empty room and the knowledge that he had been given the world and had thrown it away for $10 and a lie. And that is the final, devastating chapter of Derek Reynolds, a man who had everything and understood the value of nothing. It's a story that proves the highest heights often lead to the hardest falls when they are built on the backs of others. Emily Andrea didn't just survive. She thrived because her worth was never tied to the man who tried to diminish her. She was the architect of her own destiny all along. If this story moved you, or if you enjoyed seeing karma finally catch up to Derek, please hit that like button. It helps us continue to bring these high-drama, real-life lessons to the screen. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a new upload. I want to hear from you in the comments. What was the most satisfying moment of Derek's downfall for you? And have you ever seen a secret billionaire story happen in real life? Let's talk about it below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.